Thank you for joining us today, and we are glad that you are taking time out of your day to view this 1-hour webinar. My name is Dave Helge, Vice President of Maintenance and Safety for Idealease. Idealease is committed to providing our customers and potential customers with safety and compliance information to assist you in enhancing your safety and loss control program. Due to the pandemic, we have canceled our on-site safety seminars in 2020 to protect the safety and health of our employees and you, our customer. In lieu of the seminars, we will be presenting 6 one-hour webinars over the next 3 months. Today's webinar is the first of the series. The topic for today is who is required to comply with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations. Today we will look at the definitions of a commercial motor vehicle, intra and interstate regulations, commercial driver's license and endorsements, and more. Enjoy the webinar.
So we go through the webinar here today. You're going to see regulations posted on slides. So this one's CFR 390.5. That's our first definition. So for an interstate motor carrier crossing state lines, who has to comply to these regulations? If you operate a commercial motor vehicle with a gross vehicle weight rating, gross combination weight rating, or gross weight of 10,001 or more pounds. You're transporting more than 8 passengers, including the driver for compensation, or more than 15 passengers, including the driver not for compensation. Or you're transporting hazardous materials in placardable quantities. Typically, hazardous materials, as a rule of thumb, if you're not into table 1, which is very dangerous hazardous materials, high level, it takes 1,000 pounds or more of those hazardous materials, greater than 1,000 pounds, to be placardable. Let's go back up to the first bullet point there, and it talks about gross vehicle weight rating. So what is that? We throw that term around pretty loosely in the industry. You know, GVW, you hear it as GVWR, and then you got gross combination weight rating. So what is it, and where do you find it? So what it is when the manufacturer of a commercial motor vehicle builds a vehicle, the engineers take a look at the components to that vehicle, all of the components, and say that the maximum gross vehicle weight is X, say 25,999 pounds. Okay. So what does that include? That includes the cargo. That includes a box that's mounted on the truck. That includes a snow plow maybe that you put on the front of the truck. That includes the driver that's inside the truck. That includes the diesel fuel, the fluids that are on the truck, and even ironically includes the driver's lunch if it's in the truck. So that's the maximum amount of weight that can be transported in that vehicle. Why is that important to you? If you're leasing trucks or you're renting trucks from Idealease, you need to know how much cargo you can transport and that you want to operate legally at all times. The other reason for all that is if you end up in an accident, the reconstructionists today will reconstruct that accident and find out exactly what the gross vehicle weight was of that vehicle at the time of the accident. And if that's over what the engineers or the gross vehicle weight rating of the vehicle, that could incur some significant liability for you that you don't want to have. So where do I find this? On every commercial motor vehicle, if you open up the driver's door and the right side of that jamb as you're looking inside the truck is a sticker that is placed there, either by the manufacturer of the vehicle or by the final assembly of the vehicle, which could be a body manufacturer as well. Okay, so that's the gross vehicle weight rating, and as you can tell here, the first definition of commercial motor vehicle to the FMCSA is at 10,001 or more pounds. So I tell people that at 10,001 or more pounds, you're crossing state lines, you're transporting passengers, you're transporting hazardous materials in placardable quantities, you are in the game. You are required to comply with the regulations. So what does this all include? Driver qualification files, physical certification, hours of service, maintenance records. All those things are included at 10,001 or more pounds. And notice that it says physical certification. If you're operating a vehicle in interstate commerce crossing state lines, your driver is required to have a medical certification at 10,001 or more pounds. Okay. Maintenance records, all those things are included as required by the FMCSA. So this takes us to the second definition. The second definition is found in CFR 383.5. So what does this definition pertain to? It's the definition of a motor vehicle or combination of motor vehicles. And this is specifically for CDL licensing, okay? A motor vehicle or combination motor vehicles, if a single unit has a gross vehicle weight rating of 26,001 or more pounds, or a unit with a gross combination weight rating 26,001 or more, inclusive of a towed unit with a gross vehicle weight rating of more than 10,000 pounds, or is designed to transport 16 or more passengers, including the driver, or is of any size and is used in the transportation of hazardous materials requiring placard. Transports more than 8 passengers for compensation or more than 15 passengers, not for compensation. So then we get to the second definition. So it said more than 15, now it says 16 or more, including the driver. So same thing, we can't have half of a passenger. So that's the government regulations that make it very hard to understand sometimes when they're saying the same thing in two different ways. So this is for CDL licensing. A couple things I want to point out. Back on the first definition, if you got a unit pulling a trailer, it doesn't matter what the size of the trailer is, gross vehicle weight rating, you add those two together, and if you're over 10,001 or more pounds, you're a commercial motor vehicle. Okay. For CDL licensing, notice on bullet point number 2, it is that the trailer has to exceed 10,000 pounds, 10,001 or more pounds. So we have a lot of customers that are operating non-CDL units, 25,000, 950, 999, whatever, under 26,000. And they come to us and say, "God, I wish we could pull a trailer, but I don't want my drivers required to have a CDL license." You can pull a trailer with that non-CDL truck as long as the trailer does not exceed a GVW of 10,001 or more pounds. Okay, so first definition, trailer weights included with the power unit. Second definition, for CDL licensing, the trailer has to be 10,001 or more pounds. Okay, so we talked about this definition. Second definition is for CDL licensing. It also is the requirement for the drug and alcohol testing program, because only CDL licensed drivers are required to be in a drug and alcohol testing program per the FMCSA regulations. So at 10,001 or more pounds, gross vehicle weight rating, I've got all of the regulations I have to abide by, except for two. If I'm under 26,000 or less pounds, I don't have, my drivers wouldn't have to have commercial driver's license or be subject to drug and alcohol testing regulations. Now I go 26,001 or more, that throws us into CDL licensing and drug and alcohol testing. But it's important, like I said, at 10,001 or more pounds for interstate, you're in the game.
The driver is subject to a CDL license. So does that mean if you have one CDL truck and 10 non-CDL trucks, that everybody needs a CDL? And the answer is no. Just the driver operating the CDL truck needs a CDL license.
So I mentioned intrastate earlier, and now let's take a look at interstate, I-N-T-E-R, versus intrastate operations, okay? So interstate is governed by the FMCSA, the federal government. Intrastate is governed by your state, okay? So if we look at interstate, it's pretty simple. It's a vehicle that's greater than 10,001 pounds gross vehicle weight rating, and it crosses a state line, okay? You're then an interstate carrier. You're operated for hire bus, greater than 15 people transported across state lines, operates a for hire truck bus within one state as part of a movement that begins and ends in another state. So this is the third bullet point there, kind of gets gray. So we call this the furtherance of an interstate shipment. I can give you some examples of that. Air freight, intermodal freight. Those are pretty cut and dried, right? If I pick up air freight at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, never leave the state of Illinois, but that air freight came from outside the state of Illinois, I deliver it in-state, I'm an interstate carrier. That's a furtherance of an interstate shipment, okay? Same way with intermodal, those kind of things. We see that even in our own operation, as we are owned by Navistar truck dealers. So if you walked into a Navistar truck dealer today and said, I'm looking for a new truck, and the salesman took you out on the lot and you liked one of the trucks that were there, you make a deal with the salesman. The salesman says, let me get it all detailed out for you. I'll deliver that for you. He jumps in the truck and delivers it to you, the customer, in the same state. Is that an inter or intrastate shipment? That would be an intrastate shipment. Even though that truck was manufactured out of the state and brought into the state, its interstate shipment stopped when it was received by the dealer, because the ending destination was the dealer. Now, if you walk into the salesman, they show you trucks on the lot, you don't like any of those, you and the salesman sat down and you determine that you're going to order a truck now. And you tell them exactly what color, how you want it built, everything. And now that truck, I can tell you, with our association with Navistar, is going to be built in one of two places, Springfield, Ohio, or Escobedo, Mexico. So now that truck comes to the dealer, and the salesman jumps in the truck and delivers it to you, the customer, even though you and the dealer are in the same state. Say you're both in California, that's going to be an interstate shipment because the truck was specifically specified by you, ordered by you, with a specific ending destination. Intrastate regulations. The majority of the states have adopted the federal motor carrier regulations in part or in its entirety for intrastate operation. Majority have. The federal government goes through all of this rigorous regulation process to determine what the regulations are going to be for interstate, and the states say, hey, we're not going to go through all that. We'll just adopt what you do. I can tell you that the state that has the largest amount of differences between the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration or the regulations is the state of California, okay, for intrastate operations. Obviously, if you're an interstate carrier coming from outside the state, delivering in California, you got to abide by the federal regulations. But if you're an intrastate carrier based in California, don't leave the state, then you're subject to California intrastate operations. If you would like a copy of your intrastate regulations, there will be information at the end of the webinar that you can send me an email, and I'll be glad to send you a copy of that. Your company policies in the FMCSA regulations. We talk to customers all the time and assist them with federal regulations. And a lot of times customers will say, we don't do it that way. We do it this way. As long as you meet the minimum requirements of either the federal or the state regulations, that's fine. In fact, in today's world, litigious world that we live in, I strongly recommend that you need to go above and beyond regulations to protect the liability of your company. So now we're going to talk about commercial motor vehicle group and CDL classes. So it's interesting, if you go back far enough, back into the 1980s, prior to a CDL, drivers had the opportunity to have multiple licenses. It wasn't until July 1 of the Motor Vehicle Safety Act of 1986 went into effect July 1 of 87, that it said it was illegal to hold more than one state license. Back then, of course, technology isn't what it is today. There was no way to track the licenses. In fact, one of the first jobs I had as a safety director, I remember a driver that had multiple licenses, like a stack of cards. But the federal regulations have now required all the states to adopt the CDL license class groups. So you'll see here, Class A, combination vehicle, any combinations of vehicles with gross combination weight rating, 26,001 or more. So that's the gross vehicle weight rating of the power unit added to the gross vehicle weight rating of the trailer or more. And like I said earlier, the gross vehicle weight rating of the vehicle being towed, the trailer, is more than 10,000 pounds. If it's not 10,001 or more pounds, it's 10,000 pounds or less, it's not used in the calculation. Class B is a heavy straight vehicle. Any single vehicle, 26,001 or more, requires a Class B gross vehicle weight rating and or more. Any such vehicle being towed is not in excess of 10,000 pounds. And that's what I explained to you earlier. You can actually take a Class B vehicle greater than 26,001 and pull a trailer as long as that trailer is not in excess of 10,000 pounds. Then we got a small vehicle group. Any single vehicle or combination of vehicles that meets neither definition of A or B, designed to transport 60 or more passengers, including the driver, used to transport hazardous materials requiring placarding. We typically think of a commercial motor vehicle as a truck. I'm here to tell you it could be a motorcycle. All we'd have to do is put a little bit of radioactive material in the side compartment of a motorcycle. That would require placarding of that vehicle. It would require 4 placards on that motorcycle, a CDL license with a motorcycle endorsement, and a hazardous materials endorsement. So typically we see the classes of commercial motor vehicles as trucks or commercial vehicles, but just keep in mind it could be automobile, motorcycle, van, etc. So there's an example. Do I need a CDL to drive this van? And the answer is yes. I would need a CDL Class C with a hazardous materials endorsement to drive this at a minimum. Keep in mind that if I have a Class A with a hazardous material endorsement, I'd be able to drive this vehicle, or Class B. Class A is the highest. I can drive everything below. So here's another example. What CDL class is this? We've got a single axle tractor pulling a single axle trailer. I would say this would take a Class A license. So if you take a look at this, I can go down to the DMV and apply for CDL license. When you apply for a CDL license, it's a 2-part process. You have to take a written exam or knowledge test, and you also have to perform a skills test. So I take this vehicle to the DMV. Tractor is over 26,000. The trailer is over 10, and so I want a Class A license. I passed my knowledge test, and I passed my skills test using this truck. I am now licensed to operate that. I could be driving a tandem axle trailer, pulling a 53-foot dry-van tandem axle trailer. I've got my CDL A, no endorsements, and now I see the sign that says wanted CDL drivers, Class A, with hazardous materials endorsement, multiple trailer and tank endorsement. So I go back to the DMV with this truck, and I said, I need HAZMAT, multiple trailer, and I need a tank vehicle endorsement. Do I need to bring this truck back? I'm asking the DMV, and the DMV says, no, leave that at home. Just come in, and you're going to have to take tests. Those are knowledge tests for HAZMAT, multiple trailer, and tank vehicle endorsements. So I get on YouTube and I watch a number of YouTube videos that tell me how to take those endorsement tests. Now I go to the DMV and I pass. I get all 3 of those endorsements added to my CDL Class A, and now you can drive this vehicle, tractor pulling a gasoline tanker, and you could actually even add another trailer onto this. Keep in mind that you only got your license with that single axle tractor and a single axle trailer. So when you're hiring drivers, licensure does not equal experience. Just because they throw down that CDLA with all those endorsements, they have that experience. So let's take a look at the endorsements. So we talked about tankers. That takes a knowledge test, multiple trailers, knowledge test, hazardous materials, knowledge test, passenger, all different types of CDL endorsements. We're going to talk about the tank vehicle endorsement. This changed a few years back, but everybody needs to understand how the FMCSA defines a tank, and that's spelled out in CFR 383.5. Any CMV designed to transport any liquid or gaseous materials within a tank or tanks having an individual rated capacity of more than 119 gallons and an aggregate rated capacity of 1,000 gallons or more that is either permanently or temporarily attached to a vehicle or chassis. So the picture you see here is what we commonly call a tote. Those are typically 275 to 325 gallons each. So they would qualify as a tank, okay, rated capacity of 119 gallons. If I would rent a straight truck, dry van, 24-foot body on the back, and now I throw 4 of these into the back of that truck. So now 4, say there were 300 gallons. So now I'm setting at 1,200 gallons. Now even though I'm in a non-CDL truck, I now need a CDL minimum class B with a tank vehicle endorsement. A commercial motor vehicle transporting an empty storage container tank not designed for transportation with a rated capacity of 1,000 gallons or more that is temporarily attached to a flatbed trailer is not considered a tank vehicle. So what are they talking about here? So say we've got a flatbed carrier transporting an underground storage tank that's more than 1,000 gallons. As long as that flatbed truck is manifested as empty, they would not need a tank vehicle endorsement. So now let's take a look at CDL restrictions. There's a number of restrictions out there. The first and foremost one that I'd like to talk about is the air brake restriction. This is probably the most misunderstood restriction that there is. There's a lot of confusion. I hear all the time, do I need an air brake endorsement to operate an air brake vehicle? In the U.S., we do not have an air brake endorsement. The FMCSA does is rolls up the air brake portion of the knowledge test, and you are tested whether you understand the operations of the air brake vehicle in the knowledge test. If you fail that portion of the knowledge test regarding the air brakes, you will receive a restriction. The other way to receive a restriction is you perform a skills test in a vehicle not equipped with air brakes. Other restrictions vary by state, but there's a lot of restrictions out there. The most common, another common restriction is corrective lenses. So if you're wearing glasses or contacts, there's a restriction on your license, CDL license. Okay. CDL waivers. June 30th, the FMCSA has said that they're going to waive any medical certification that expires for CDLs and medical certifications if it is expired after March 1st of 2020. So this is part of the COVID pandemic, the FMCSA's relaxing of the regulations to assist motor carriers because number one, the DMVs are not open. And number two is the doctors performing the medical certifications. A lot of them are not performing this type of non-essential medical care. There is talk that this is maybe extended. We'll have to wait. I know my license has expired. And what they say is once they open back up the DMVs, you've got 90 days to get your license renewed. The FMCSA, right now, if your drivers have expired CDLs, but they have to have expired since March 1st of 2020. HAZMAT endorsement. You may have drivers that work for you that have a hazardous material endorsement. They want to keep it. States prohibited from using or renewing a CDL with HAZMAT endorsement unless the Transportation Security Administration, the TSA, has conducted a security threat assessment and determined the applicant does not pose a security risk. HAZMAT endorsement holder is notified at least 60 days prior to the expiration. I would strongly recommend that you file the renewal at least 30 days prior to the expiration date. Drivers should go through the link below, tsa.gov for industry HAZMAT endorsement. So this is the TSA that does this security threat assessment. Will you be notified as a motor carrier if a driver fails the security threat assessment? And the answer is yes. Another question that comes up frequently with the HAZMAT endorsement: if my driver fails it, will they still provide them with a CDL? And the answer is yes. They only revoke the endorsement or not provide it if they fail the security threat assessment. So what's all in this security threat assessment? Obviously, they're looking for terrorists, right? This all came about after September 11th. TSA got involved and were very concerned about drivers of hazardous materials driving into buildings, etc. But it's just not terrorism. Take a look at on the slide here. There's assault with intent to murder, espionage, all kinds of things, bribery, smuggling, arson. There's all kinds of things that if your driver was convicted of, that they could not obtain a hazardous material endorsement. The new entrant audit is required for all new carriers obtaining new U.S. DOT authority. It's completed in the first 12 months. So who completes it? Typically, state carrier enforcement completes this for the FMCSA. FMCSA officers, there's not that many throughout the United States, so there's a lot of new entrants entering the industry. The state carrier enforcement are the ones that typically will be in contact with you if you obtain a new operating authority. 60 pass-fail questions, 16 regulations designated that if failed would result in authority being revoked if not corrected in 60 days. The FMCSA has a great website here. If you've tuned me out because you're not a new entrant, listen up. This is a great website to go to that you can conduct your own internal audit because they go through all of the requirements of the regulations. So get on that website, even if you're not a new entrant, take a look at it, and it can help you out with your compliance. Next item we'll take a look at is the MCS 150. Must be filed by a motor carrier operating in interstate or foreign commerce. This is part of your new authority application package. The FMCSA maintains basically an electronic file on each and every motor carrier in the U.S. You're required to update this every 2 years based on the last digit, the last 2 digits of your U.S. DOT number. The last digit is the month, the next to the last digit is the year. Even numbers file in even number years, odd numbers file in odd number years. That's the regulation. So why do I have to do this? Well, number one is the FMCSA has no way of knowing the changes to your operation. Say you acquire another fleet, you add trucks, you delete trucks, whatever. They're not keeping track of that through the state DMVs. They need to be told every 2 years how many trucks you got, how many miles you're running, how many drivers, a bunch of questions that are outlined on the MCS 150. You're put into peer groups. The peer groups are really tight, 100 and below. So if you add trucks, make sure that you update the MCS 150. As long as it's been updated in the last 2 years, you're fine. If you don't do it on the last digit of the month, or you did it a year earlier, you did it 18 months earlier, it doesn't matter as long as it's updated in the last 24 months. If you haven't had this discussion with your drivers, you should. Today, CDL licensed drivers are more vulnerable than they've ever been for losing their license, okay? Because now CDL holders can be disqualified for major offenses or serious traffic violations in any type of vehicle. So if your driver thinks, hey, I was just driving a car, I was driving my motorcycle when I had that violation, it's not going to affect my CDL. It depends on what the violation is. If it's major or serious, it will affect the CDL. If you're the one reviewing the motor vehicle records for your drivers, at least hopefully annually you're doing that, you need to know what those disqualification tables look like. So right there, CFR 383.51, take a look at those disqualifications. Like I said earlier, if you haven't talked to your drivers about this, excellent safety meeting topic. So CDL disqualifications, major offenses while driving commercial motor vehicle, alcohol concentration 0.04 or more, revoked, suspended, or canceled CDL, operating commercial motor vehicle while disqualified, causing a fatality through negligent operation of a commercial motor vehicle. Minimum, you're disqualified for 1 year, could be to life. Serious traffic violations while driving commercial motor vehicle, driving without obtaining a CDL, no CDL in the driver's possession. And this is one that we go through with our rental managers in their training, is that your driver has to provide to us when you've sent them down to pick up a rental truck, that CDL license. So our rental managers look each and every time. I don't care that we just rented your driver a truck last week and looked at his license. We're going to look at it again. Okay. They have to have it in their possession. Driving without the proper class or CDL license and or endorsements, conviction of 2 and a 3, 60 days, conviction 3 and 3 years, 120 days. Major offenses in any type of vehicle, and we mean any type of vehicle. And I think I've about heard it all, from farm tractors on public roads to jet skis to ATVs to buses to RVs to motorcycles, of course, cars, any type of motor vehicle, basically. Driving under the influence of alcohol or controlled substance, refusal to take a required alcohol test, leaving the scene of an accident, using a vehicle to commit a felony while committing a felony involving the manufacturing, distribution, or dispensing of a controlled substance, you're disqualified from 1 year to life. So if it's 4th of July weekend and your driver is out on the water in the boat, gets pulled over and doesn't want to take the test because he wants to thinks he can save his CDL, that's not going to work. Refusal to take a required alcohol test, they'll be disqualified for 1 year to life. Serious traffic violations while operating any type of vehicle, excessive speed greater than 15 miles an hour above the posted speed limit, reckless driving, and look at that definition, improper erratic lane changes, following a vehicle ahead too closely, violation in connection with a fatal accident. 60-day, 120-day suspension, second and third convictions resulting in a revocation, cancellation, or suspension. How do you know that your driver had his license suspended? Some states will notify you. They have programs in place to do that, but the majority of the states don't. So here's a tip for you, just to protect your exposure. It's not foolproof, but in your driver's policy and procedures manual that you review with them when you hire them, make sure that they are immediately notifying you of any type of violation.
Because according to the regulation, the driver is to notify the motor carrier within 30 days of date of conviction, not arrest, but of conviction.
So things can go on for a long time suspended in the court system and you still don't know. Make it part of your company policy that drivers are required to notify their supervisor anytime there's a warning on up. So as we take a look at CDL licenses, we need to take a look at some best practices that you should adopt. One is the proper CDL endorsements and restrictions. Every time you take a look at a license, either for hiring a new driver, one of your existing drivers has renewed their license, you need to understand what's on the license. You need to understand the expiration date, endorsements, restrictions, everything that's on there. Don't just copy the license and throw the copy in the driver qualification file. Understand what the driver has. Track expiration dates of time-sensitive documents. Don't rely on your drivers to make sure that their licenses are renewed, their medical certifications are renewed on time, all of that. You track those dates and make sure that you have the renewals. If you do not have the renewals, especially for licenses and medical certifications at the time of expiration, pull a driver out of service. Do not allow a driver to operate with licenses expired or medical expired. There's only one exception to that, and we're living it right now with the pandemic, right? And I just went over that there is an exemption to those if your license is expired or after March 1st, same with your medical certification. And then we discussed it previously as well. Company policy for reporting of violations, warnings, arrests, convictions, as well as roadside inspections. It's important that those drivers notify you immediately when they've received a warning, violation, whatever. You need to make sure what you're dealing with your drivers.
Now that we have concluded the webinar, I would ask that if you have any questions about the material we covered today, that you please email me. Our next webinar in the series will be on August 26th, and we will address qualifying a driver of a commercial motor vehicle. I will leave up my contact information for you to email questions that you may have. The registration link will also be there for you to register for a future webinar. Thanks again for attending the webinar. Stay safe and take care.